No one ever tells you how love can unravel the edges of your mind, how it can leave you trembling in the shadows of your own memories. I remember that day like a fractured dream, the kind that lingers long after the light has gone out. I was lost, drifting through the quiet chaos of my own thoughts, when I first saw him in that rain-soaked cafe corner. It was one of those moments when time feels liquid, slipping between your fingers, hiding secrets in the pitter-patter of rain on the window. The place smelled of roasted coffee beans and damp paper, a comforting scent that couldn't quite mask the underlying sting of loneliness. I had come there to escape the weight of my grief, to drown the ache that had settled into my chest since I'd lost everything I once held dear. The flickering light above our table cast uneven shadows, making the small space feel like a fragile sanctuary. Outside, the rain blurred the world into a watercolor wash, each drop a whisper of something I couldn't quite grasp. He appeared suddenly, as if summoned by the storm, with an intensity that made my skin crawl. His eyes were dark, but not in a familiar way, more like they held secrets, shadows that refused to yield. He approached with a slow, deliberate grace, as if the very air around him dared not disturb him. Without asking, he ordered 2 coffees, voice smooth and low, like a song that had already been sung too many times. When I looked up, our eyes met, an arresting, almost unnatural connection. His gaze was too focused, too fixed. It felt like he was trying to see through me, into parts one hadn't yet revealed. He complimented my choice of book as if he'd read my mind, uttering a cryptic line that sounded rehearsed but sincere. "You look like someone who's searching for answers beyond the pages," he said, voice steady but with an edge of something darker. I felt my cheeks flush, unsure if I was flattered or unnerved. There was an intimacy in that moment, a strange electric charge, as if the universe had conspired to make us collide. I reached for my cup, the ceramic cracking softly under my fingertips, an almost imperceptible sign that something delicate was shifting. He touched my hair briefly, as if checking something hidden beneath the surface. I remember the sensation, warm, almost invasive, and how it sent a shiver down my spine. He spoke of fate as if he knew my story without asking, whispering truths I hadn't shared aloud. I wondered if I should pull away, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, feeling like a moth circling a lamp, drawn even as I sensed the danger glowing beneath the light. That day, I felt like I was stepping into a story I hadn't written myself, something fragile, yet ominous. The way he looked at me, so intensely, made me question whether I was seeing a stranger, or the reflection of a deeper darkness. And as I left that rainy corner, I couldn't shake the thought that I'd crossed a threshold I might never fully return from. Back then I thought it was love, or some twisted form of it. Now, I wonder if it was the first sign that I was already being watched, that someone had seen me before I even saw myself. And perhaps, that was the moment I lost my way entirely. He had a way of remembering the smallest details, almost as if he stored pieces of my soul in his mind. One night, he looked at me and softly repeated something I'd said days ago, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. It was as if my words had etched themselves into him, becoming part of some secret language only we understood. That moment made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years, like I'd finally found someone who truly listened, who understood the unspoken parts of me. It was intoxicating, this feeling that we shared something rare, almost predestined, as if the universe had conspired to bring us together. He confided in me about his own scars, sharing stories of loneliness and loss that echoed my own feelings of emptiness. His voice was steady but trembling, as if revealing his vulnerability made him more real, more connected. I found myself leaning closer, craving that sense of intimacy. He told me I was unlike anyone else. "No one sees the world like you do," he whispered, voice thick with admiration and something darker that I couldn't quite grasp. His words wrapped around me like a warm blanket, making it easy to forget how fragile the boundaries between us were. One night, he brought me a small gift, a delicate bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a star, engraved with my initials. I remember feeling my heartbeat quicken as he gently clasped it around my wrist. His fingers lingered longer than necessary, and I caught the faintest glint in his eyes. "This matches your tattoo," he said softly, almost reverently. It was a strange, almost sacred gesture, like he was claiming a part of me without words. I looked down at the bracelet, feeling a strange sense of safety, as if the quiet weight of it tethered me to him in some unbreakable way. He began to subtly question who I was texting late at night, his voice gentle but insistent. "Do they really know you like I do?" he asked, eyes searching mine. I told myself it was just concern, that he cared deeply. But beneath that, I sensed the faint thread of control weaving into his words, a possessiveness masked as devotion. I found myself answering faster, canceling plans without hesitation, eager to keep him close. My mind started rearranging itself around his needs, as if his approval was the only thing that mattered anymore. He touched my journal one day, flipping through the pages with a quiet reverence, suddenly saying, "This makes me feel closer to you." His hand lingered on an old photo of me, and I felt a strange shiver run down my spine. It was as if he was absorbing my history, my secrets, silently claiming them. Sitting beside him in silence, I realized I felt exposed, naked even, but strangely comforted by the stillness. It was the kind of silence that suffocated rather than calmed, a reminder that I was slowly surrendering parts of myself without realizing. In those quiet moments, I could feel how much I wanted to be enough for him, how eager I was to meet his unspoken needs. I answered him quicker, sometimes even before he finished speaking, craving his praise, desperate not to disappoint. Yet, beneath my longing, a flicker of caution whispered, "Something's not right." I told myself this was love, that all this closeness meant I was finally safe. But a darker thought crept in. If obsession feels like protection, then maybe I was never truly safe at all. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was the only one who truly understood him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slowly disappearing into him, losing myself piece by piece. I wondered, with a trembling breath, if this was love, or if I was just tethered to a fragile thread that could snap at any moment, pulling me into something far more dangerous than I dared to admit. It started with small, almost unnoticed interruptions, like a faint whisper in the back of my mind that I couldn't quite silence. I'd be in the middle of my morning routine when a text would ping, and suddenly he'd be there, just checking in, as if I couldn't be trusted to have a life outside of his shadow. "I was in the neighborhood," he'd say later, as if that explained everything, as if I should be grateful for his concern. But I knew better. I felt the subtle shift in my days, as if he was slowly rewriting the map I thought I knew. He started showing up unannounced, not often, but enough that I began to expect him. "Just dropping by," he'd say softly, with that gentle tone that made me doubt my instincts. "I wanted to see you," he'd add, as if my presence was his right, not a choice I made. And I found myself adjusting my schedule, dinner at odd hours, my mornings less my own, because he insisted on aligning everything to his needs. Even my sleep felt lighter, as if my resting hours belonged to him now, quietly dictated by his presence. He sent voice notes constantly, checking my location, asking who I was with, reminding me that he was always watching. Not in a way that felt overtly threatening, but enough to make me wonder if I was losing my sense of space. I caught myself hesitating before replying, as if I needed to filter my words, to avoid setting off some invisible alarm. Sometimes I'd forget what I'd said or done, and he'd gently, or not so gently, correct me. "I never said that, babe," he'd whisper through a voice note, his tone so calm I almost questioned my own memory. "You're misremembering again." It became a familiar refrain, like a lullaby that kept me questioning the reality I thought I knew. My thoughts grew murky, fractured. My days felt like smudged chalk. Once clear outlines blurred into indistinct shapes I couldn't quite grasp. I'd catch glimpses of myself in the mirror, and wonder who I was anymore. The walls of my mind felt like wallpaper peeling at the edges, revealing a space I no longer recognized. Everything was shrinking, quieter, like someone was turning down the volume on my life, silencing parts of me I desperately wanted to hold on to. I found myself canceling plans without explanation, laughing when I wanted to cry, rehearsing answers just to keep the peace. The more I tried to hold on to my sense of self, the more I saw myself slipping away, like a shadow dissolving into darkness. I told myself he was just scared to lose me, that his concern came from love. But why did it feel like I was the one disappearing? Why did I keep hiding the parts of myself that felt fragile or wrong? Inside, a quiet voice whispered a question I was too afraid to voice aloud. Maybe this was love, but why did I feel so alone inside it? Each time I stayed silent, I wondered if I was choosing peace or surrender. And I couldn't help but wonder, as the walls of my mind grew closer in, if I was losing myself entirely, one subtle step at a time. Every time I closed a door for him, I left part of myself on the other side. It started small, silencing my favorite playlist, deleting old photos, hiding my sketches in a drawer he'd never look in. At first, I felt like I was doing it for us, for peace. But every act of concealment felt more like a surrender, like I was slowly erasing what made me feel alive. I wasn't choosing peace. I was just choosing not to be seen. Not by him, not by myself. He never raised his voice, but there was a way he made me feel small without words. Sometimes he'd say I used to be more loving, more spontaneous, as if I'd become a stranger to my own warmth. His praise came wrapped in a gentle nudge. "You're so different now," he'd whisper softly, almost tender. And I'd smile for him, but I don't think it reached my eyes anymore. It was a smile that belonged to someone else. A version I thought he'd approve of. I remember hiding a painting I'd kept hidden in a drawer. A small piece of my past that made me feel whole. I thought if I kept it away, I'd be safer. But every time I did, I felt a faint crack in my chest, like I was losing touch with who I was. It wasn't just about the painting. It was about the quiet piece of myself I was leaving behind, piece by piece, in the shadows of what I thought I could control. He praised my silence, my compliance. When I stopped wearing certain clothes he didn't like, I told myself it was just a small act of care. But I knew deep down I was shrinking, becoming easier to manage. The more I gave up, the more I wondered if I was still the person I used to be or just a reflection of what he needed me to be. I kept telling myself I loved him, that this was just temporary. But inside, a voice kept whispering that I was disappearing. Sometimes I caught myself looking in the mirror, avoiding my reflection. I didn't recognize the woman who looked back. She seemed distant, blurred around the edges, like I was fading into the background of my own life. I kept the phone always on silent, afraid of the messages I might find. Messages that would remind me of how far I'd fallen, how much I'd given up. He never told me I was changing, but I could feel it. His words, his gaze, they made me feel guilty for wanting more, for dreaming outside the boundaries he subtly set. Guilt became my shadow, whispering that I was ungrateful, that I'd lost my love for him. So I quieted my own voice, silenced the doubts, and let the pieces of myself drift further away. And now I sit in this emptiness, exhausted, fragile. I no longer know where I end and he begins. I smile when I'm supposed to, hide what I feel, and wonder if I ever truly knew myself at all. I fear I've already become a ghost of who I was, softly crumbling unnoticed, slipping into the silence he's crafted around me. Sometimes I wonder if I can still find my way back, or if I've already disappeared into the shadows of who I once was. I woke up and couldn't tell what day it was, or if I'd even slept at all. The room felt like a shifting shadow, walls melting into each other, colors bleeding into black and white. I avoided the mirror, afraid of what I might see, something unfamiliar lurking behind my reflection. My own face seemed to flicker like a broken projection, as if I was watching myself from a distant shore, disconnected and distorted. It was as if I existed in fragments, each piece flickering in and out of focus. My thoughts felt foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. I'd catch myself repeating his words in my head, echoing his truths and dismissing my own memories as if they were lies. Even my voice sounded wrong, so hollow, so tentative, like I'd forgotten how to speak in my own voice. I'd try to grasp a memory, a feeling, but it slipped through my mind's fingers, dissolving into a haze of doubt. Maybe I hadn't been real to begin with. He was everywhere, reshaping my internal world with quiet precision. I noticed how he'd changed the wallpaper on my phone, replacing my familiar photos with cold, calculated images. The old pictures of friends, of places I loved, they'd been erased, replaced by his choice. My journal was gone, replaced with a new one, blank and untouched, as if my past had been wiped clean. My playlist, the soundtrack of my life, had been deleted and replaced with a song he made, a melody that felt like a trap echoing in my head. It was as if he was rewriting my history, blurring the lines between what was mine and what belonged to him. Sometimes I'd catch myself believing his version of reality, even when my instincts screamed otherwise. A part of me clung to an illusion, hope that maybe I was still myself, somewhere beneath these layers of control. But another part was quietly screaming for escape, desperate to break free from this invisible cage. I was living in a fractured mirror, my reflection split into shards, each telling a different story. Even my internal voice felt divided. One side whispering love, attachment, and the comforting lie that I still had a choice. The other, darker side, was whispering that I was losing myself, that I'd already disappeared, swallowed by the silence he imposed. I felt like I was being rewritten in his handwriting, each word on my mind's pages carefully crafted to erase the girl I used to be. Sometimes I'd hear a faint whisper of memory, an echo of who I once was, fading into the background. I'd clutch at it, trying to hold on to her, but she was slipping away, dissolving into the fog of his lies. Maybe I hadn't vanished yet, but I could no longer remember the girl I used to be. My reflection was just a ghost, and my voice sounded so foreign, even in my own mind. If I was still in there somewhere, I couldn't find her anymore. I was losing myself, one fragment at a time, and the more I searched, the more I realized I might be gone entirely, hidden beneath the layers of his control. My reflection no longer moved in sync with me. I stared into the mirror, but my own face seemed distorted, like a shadow flickering out of focus. I reached out to touch it, and for a moment, my hand passed right through. When I blinked, the image was back, but something felt off, like I was watching a ghost imitate myself. The glass was foggy, smudged with 1,000 unseen fingerprints, and I realized I couldn't remember when I last cleaned it. Was it today? Yesterday? Or had I been staring at this same blurry reflection for hours, maybe days? Time had become a tangled thread, slipping through my fingers without warning. I picked up a notebook, desperate to anchor myself, but the handwriting on the page was unfamiliar. Letters jumbled, words slurred together as if someone else had written them in my name. I couldn't recognize my own scrawl, and the date. Was it real? Or had it been erased, rewritten, manipulated? My memories spun in circles, each attempt to grasp them slipping further from my grasp. I kept asking myself, how long have I been here? But the answer dissolved into a fog of confusion. The walls around me seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as if the room itself was alive and watching, waiting for me to forget what was real. His voice echoed in my mind, louder than my own thoughts. It was a whisper, soft yet commanding, reminding me of things I couldn't verify. "You're safe," he would say, "or don't trust your eyes." I'd hear it even when I was alone, as if he was inside my head, rearranging the landscape of my consciousness. Sometimes I thought I saw him in the corner of my vision, standing just out of reach, a shadow flickering with a faint, mocking smile. Other times, I'd catch glimpses of memories that didn't belong to me. Images of a childhood I never had, a sister I never knew. But were they real? Or were they his creation, planted to make me doubt everything I'd ever believed? Even my dreams had their rules now, and they were his. I'd wake up feeling like I'd been pulled through a kaleidoscope of his design, fragmented, distorted, and out of control. The boundaries of my mind were dissolving, like a wall cracking under pressure. I'd find myself questioning whether my thoughts were truly mine, or just echoes of his voice, echoing louder than my own, even in silence. I'd hear him in the quiet moments, a constant presence I couldn't escape, whispering commands I couldn't remember giving. One day, I found a photograph tucked behind a loose panel, something I thought was gone forever. It was a picture of me, but my face was blurred, my eyes hollow. I stared at it, trembling, trying to grasp its meaning. Then I saw a single note, written in my handwriting, but with a strange, trembling script. It read simply, "Remember." That tiny word felt like a lifeline, a faint flicker of resistance buried beneath layers of manipulation. Maybe I was still in there somewhere, fighting to stay alive. I clung to that thought, desperate for it to be true. There was a whisper beneath the silence, a fragile voice that might have been mine, or perhaps just the faint echo of who I used to be. I prayed it was me, that beneath the chaos, I was still hiding, waiting for the moment I could remember how to fight back. Because if I forgot everything, myself, my past, my truth, I'd be lost forever. And yet, deep down, I knew that somewhere inside, a flicker of resistance still burned. I just had to find it before I fully disappeared. My mind felt like it shattered into 1,000 jagged shards, each one slicing through my consciousness with brutal precision. I was standing in the dim light of the bedroom, trembling as the weight of everything crashed down on me. Everything I had ignored, everything I had pretended wasn't real. And then I saw it. The bracelet with her name. Her name. A name I'd never heard him mention, never seen written anywhere else. Yet there it was, gleaming in the faint glow of the bedside lamp, resting on our bed as if it belonged there. My breath hitched, and my entire body went cold, like I'd been dipped in ice water. It was the moment I knew. The moment I realized I had been living inside a carefully constructed lie, one he'd built around me, around us. And the truth hit me with a force so violent, I felt my skull split open. This wasn't just paranoia. It was an invasion of my reality. I clutched my head, trembling as a scream clawed its way out of my throat, but no sound escaped. Inside, it was chaos, an earthquake tearing through my mind, my identity peeling away layer by layer. I'd been so desperate to hold on to who I was, but now I wondered if I'd ever known her at all. A voice inside whispered that I was already gone, that I'd been erasing myself piece by piece. Photos deleted, memories rewritten, words unspoken that now echoed in the emptiness. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, but it wasn't me. The face staring back was a stranger, blank and hollow, as if the person I'd been had slipped away without me noticing. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of despair crushing me, and I wondered if I had ever truly existed outside of his carefully curated version of me. And in that moment of raw, trembling vulnerability, I questioned everything. Was I losing my mind? Or had I already lost it? Maybe I'd been living in a dream so long that I didn't recognize the nightmare anymore. Or perhaps, I never had a choice. Was I just another character in his twisted game? A puppet with strings I'd been too afraid to cut? The thought terrified me, more than the bracelet, more than the silence that followed. I wanted to run, to scream, to hide somewhere far away from this suffocating trap. But I was rooted to the spot, trembling, tears streaming down my face as a helpless realization took hold. I was at the edge of something I couldn't undo. I could feel the cracks forming inside me, fissures that threatened to swallow what little sanity I had left. I clutched my fists and whispered my own name into the darkness, trying to remember if it still belonged to me, or if I was already gone. A part of me wanted to break free, to shatter what remained of this illusion. But another part, weak, exhausted, resigned, knew I wasn't ready yet. I stood there in the silence, fists clenched, whispering my name over and over, desperately trying to hold on to the fragments of myself before they vanished completely. Something inside cracked, an invisible fracture I could feel deep within. And for the first time, I didn't flinch when it did, because I knew with terrifying certainty that I was no longer the person I once was. And I wondered if I'd ever find her again. I was making tea, the steam curling softly in the quiet kitchen, when I noticed the message blinking on my phone. A single word. "Are you okay?" It was from a number I didn't recognize. My heart stuttered, then pounded harder. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of silence pressing down on me. How did someone find me? How did they know? I reached out, trembling, but the message was gone, disappeared into the digital void, as if it had never existed. I looked around, trying to steady my breath, but everything felt wrong. The room seemed unfamiliar, the shadows deeper than before. I caught sight of the photo on the shelf, an image I'd seen 100 times, and it stared back at me distorted. The smile, the background, the framing, all subtly skewed, as if someone had rearranged it. I never touched it, yet it felt alive, mocking my confusion. My gaze drifted to the mirror. My reflection seemed different, more distant. My own eyes looked back, hollow, unrecognizable. I reached up and touched my hair, but my hands moved with a strange, rehearsed rhythm, as if someone had trained them. I saw my own handwriting on a note I'd never written. The ink scrawled unevenly, the words distorted. I tried to remember, but the memories felt fragmented, staged, like scenes from a nightmare I'd never had. In the silence, a whisper of sound, something faint, almost inaudible, caught my attention. It was a voice I knew, or thought I knew, but the words were wrong. I listened again and it hit me. I hadn't made that call. I never dialed that number. It was a voice I'd never heard before. Yet it sounded so familiar, so close. The closet door was slightly ajar, revealing a dress I didn't recognize hanging inside. I'd never bought it. When I picked it up, the fabric felt strange, off in some inexplicable way. As I looked closer, I saw a faint stain along the hem, a dark, sticky hint of something hidden beneath the fabric. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. I was losing my grip, slipping into a reality that was never mine to begin with. And then I saw it, the bracelet, lying on my bed, with her name engraved. A name I'd never known, never chosen. My stomach dropped. That was the moment I understood. I'd been erased, rewritten, manipulated into a version of myself I no longer recognized. The love I believed I'd felt, the trust I'd given, none of it was real. He hadn't fallen in love with me. He'd built me piece by piece like a sculpture of control. Every word, every gesture, was a lock clicking shut around me. It wasn't just a lie. It was a story he wrote using my skin as paper. I realized I wasn't just a victim of obsession. I was a construct, a puppet in his carefully crafted illusion. And that thought shattered what little certainty I had left. I was no longer sure where I ended and he began. My sense of self was a fractured mirror, each shard reflecting a different, terrifying version of the truth. I clutched my chest, trembling, trying to breathe through the chaos. My mind spun with the realization that I'd been living inside a story he'd written. One where I was never truly free. I had to escape, had to break free from this nightmare that had become my reality. But first, I had to decide. How much more of myself could I lose before there was nothing left? I waited until I heard his breathing slow, then quietly reached for my phone. Trembling so badly I thought it might slip from my fingers. My pulse hammered in my ears, each beat echoing with a mix of fear and desperate hope. This was the moment I'd been thinking about. The small, fragile attempt to reclaim some piece of myself. Even if I wasn't sure what I'd do once I had it. I'd packed only what I could remember buying myself. A few clothes, a scrap of paper with my real name scrawled on it, and my trembling resolve. Standing in front of the mirror, I whispered my name aloud, just to hear it again, to remind myself who I was beneath the layers of his control. My fingers shook like they didn't belong to me anymore, stiff and uncertain. Every movement felt watched, as if the walls had ears, the silence thick with the weight of unseen eyes. What if he was already in my head? What if everything I did was just another part of his plan, another way to keep me tethered? The trauma had rewired my instincts. I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Even the silence felt like a trap. I took a shaky step toward the door, heart pounding so loud I feared it might betray me. My hand hesitated on the doorknob. Then I pushed it open. The hallway was dark, shadows stretching long and distorted, but I moved forward, each step feeling like walking through quicksand. The house was eerily silent, no sign of him. Yet I could feel him somewhere just beyond my reach, waiting. Suddenly, I saw it, a glint on the bed. My heart stopped. The bracelet with her name had been there all along, a small, cruel reminder of the person I used to be. I reached out, trembling, and yanked it free, the metal snapping with a cold, sharp sound that echoed in the quiet. I clutched it tightly, as if holding on to a fragment of my past could somehow anchor me somewhere safe. But just as I turned toward the door, I heard it, the faint click of a lock. My stomach twisted. Maybe I'd been caught. Maybe I was too late. My breath hitched as I froze, my mind racing to find a way out, any way out. I saw the window, there, a thin slit, just enough to crawl through if I dared. My body felt frozen, caught between the instinct to run and the fear of what awaited outside. In that moment, I tore a page from my journal, the one with my real name, the one I'd hidden from him, ripping it free with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The paper tore unevenly, but I didn't care. I needed to destroy everything that tethered me to this nightmare. As I crumpled the fragment in my hand, I felt a fleeting sense of control. Fragile and fleeting, but real. I didn't run yet. I just stood there, clutching the torn paper and the bracelet, my breath ragged. I knew he'd come soon. He'd sense I was trying to break free. I could feel the weight of his gaze, even if I couldn't see it. My mind was a jumble of fear and resolve. caught between the urge to hide and the desperate hope to escape. I had cracked the glass, but I could still see him staring through it, waiting. And I knew, when he found out, when he realized I was no longer under his control, that the final confrontation was inevitable. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't stay any longer. The silence around me was deafening, and I could feel the darkness creeping in. I wasn't free yet, but I was standing on the edge of something I might not survive. I didn't run. Not yet. I just stood there, trembling, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst from my chest. The door was still open, but I could feel him watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. My mind was a whirlwind of fear, anger, and desperation. How could I have come this far, only to be caught now? I clutched the torn page and the bracelet, trying to steady my trembling hands, knowing that whatever was coming next would change everything. In that frozen moment, I saw his face, calm, almost amused, like he'd been expecting this all along. I remembered the way he always said he never had a sister, how he insisted I was just a stranger he'd found, a ghost from a past I'd erased. But that bracelet with her name on our bed, that proved he'd been lying all along. And I had almost believed him. Almost. He stepped closer, and I could see the flicker of something darker behind his eyes. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I felt my voice rising, trembling but firm. Who are you? Why did you do this? Who is she? His lips curled into a slow, unsettling smile. You've always been part of my story. I just rewrote the ending. You're not who you think you are. None of it is real. His words felt like icy knives stabbing through my mind. I clutched the torn page tighter, feeling the weight of my own fractured memories. My voice cracked as I whispered. I remember who I am. I remember my name. I remember everything you tried to erase. I looked at the mirror on the wall, its cracked surface reflecting my distorted face. I saw her, my true self, faint but there, buried beneath the layers of manipulation. I realized then that I had been living in a reflection he had shattered and reconstructed so many times I'd forgotten who I was. He reached out, but I stepped back, eyes blazing. No, I said, voice steadier than I felt. No more. I'm done pretending. I'm done hiding. You can't rewrite me anymore. I ripped the bracelet from my wrist and threw it on the floor, watching it spin and clatter. Her name, her memory, shattered with it. I turned away from him, feeling the cracks in my soul widen, but refusing to break. I looked around the room one last time. The symbols of his control. Photos erased, voices silenced, memories erased. Now nothing but ruins. I grabbed the torn page and the small journal I'd hidden. The only pieces of myself I hadn't surrendered. I whispered my true name aloud. A vow to reclaim what was left of me. I am still here. I am still me. As I moved toward the door, I saw his face twist in anger, but I didn't care. I had one chance. To escape, to reclaim my life. I pushed open the door, heart pounding, and sprinted into the night, breath ragged but alive. I knew he would come after me, that the battle wasn't over. But I also knew I had taken back a fragment of myself, that I'd fought through the darkness and come out the other side. Now, as I stand in the cold silence of the street, clutching my torn pieces and my true name, I realize that even in the deepest shadows, there's a flicker of light. Maybe I didn't escape unscathed. Maybe I carry scars I'll never fully heal. But I survived. And somehow, that's everything. Even now, when I hear his voice echoing in my mind, I whisper my name louder, because I am still here. I am still me.